I'm an idea marketer, okay? I'm a marketer of ideas. On our farm, on the little slogan on our cooler bags for our customers is healing the land one bite at a time. Storytellers become the leaders. The actual production skill is secondary to communication skills. And ultimately, marketing is about storytelling.
You have probably one of the most famous mentees ever.
Yes, we mentored Tide, but it's people like that that move us beyond where we think we can go. That's always the sign of a leader.
My grandpa never complained about anything. They got on with their work, and he said, "No, Brian, I never quit, because on the farm, if you quit, you die."
Whatever you do in life, whatever vocation you choose, make sure that when you look back on what you've left behind, it's all been devoted to healing.
This week on the show, we have Joel Salatin, who is the American farmer, author, and lecturer, and he's really known as the face of sustainable farming. He's been there, done that, TED Talks, Joe Rogan. He's also the mentor of Mr. Tai Lopez, and we sat down with Joel and talked about his 10 books and really about what we're doing wrong with the things we're eating and how we can all take control of our life, starting by cooking a meal in the kitchen. And that's one of the greatest pieces of advice he gave. And it's really all about what you eat, what is in your kitchen, what's in your mouth, and super important to sit down with Joel. He's really a hardcore farmer. To be honest, he really reminded me of my grandpa Rose, who was a potato farmer in Colorado. And he's just no nonsense. And he writes books that are called things like, "Folks, This Ain't Normal." And he's really trying to shock us out of the way that we look about our food just being created by these industrial machines. So I think you're really gonna enjoy this episode with Joel. And he also talked a lot about his own success habits, how he writes, how he creates a business, and even how he mentored Mr. Tai Lopez. So you're gonna enjoy this show. I've actually shared a Lamborghini with Joel, of all things. So there you go. You've probably heard me talking about our soon to be opened Life Accelerator. It is 6 weeks where a small group of London Reelers and myself are gonna get together to kick off 2017 with a vengeance. I'm taking everything I've learned from legends on London Reel for the past 5 years and putting it all into a 6-week program where you're gonna upgrade your mindset, your body, your health, your fitness, your accountability, and get yourself a plan for 2017 and crush this year. Everyone has been asking me for this program, and we're finally doing it. So get ready to make 2017 your best year ever, and I'll be sending out more information about that this week. And now I leave you with Mr. Joel Salatin. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Joel Salatin, the American farmer, lecturer, and author. Your organic, grass-fed, polyface farm services more than 3,000 local families, retail outlets, and restaurants, and is featured as the blueprint of sustainable agriculture in documentary films like Food, Inc. and Fresh. According to Times Magazine, you're the most innovative farmer in the world, and also the first mentor of our previous guest, Mr. Ty Lopez. You are the author of 10 books, including Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, Folks, This Ain't Normal, and most recently, The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs. Joel, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
It's great to be here too. I'm curious what it's like when you fly into London and you're like, okay, here I am in the UK and I'm in London. What do you think of the city, the country in general, and also when it comes to things like agriculture?
Well, I first of all, you have to kind of pinch yourself. I'm really a farm boy, and I still am there 2/3 of the time, and I never want to lose my farmer's calluses. They're there. But this 1/3 of my life is this, going around. And what strikes me most in traveling is just how similar we are. Sure, we're different. We have different, politics and different climates and different latitudes and longitudes and that sort of thing. But really, we're a lot more similar than dissimilar. Everybody wants to be healthy. They all want a better future for their kids than they had for themselves. They want happy marriages. They want happy relationships. They want to do noble things, sacred, good, noble things. That's everywhere, and the needs are essentially the same, and societal societal problems and issues, those sorts of things, they're very similar. And so that's what always strikes me, is just how, in the big scheme of things, a city is a city is a city. The country is the country is the country, and we're all people, and we're all just here struggling with legacy and with sacred calling and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because you watch the news and it's kind of us and them, and those people
Right.
do those funny things and believe in that, and they hate us and we hate them. And when you go shake hands with someone, probably even more so on a farm,
Right.
you're like, well, wait a second, they're just like me. What they probably want to do is aspire to noble things, like you said, live in peace, raise a family, put the right things in their body, do the right things for the environment, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We're way more cousins than enemies in that sense of the word. From a big picture.
Right. When I've been here now about 12, 13 years, and recently I was speaking, this whole, I think in the last few years, just like in the rest of the world, and especially in London, people are thinking more about locally grown things and this kind of thing. And, London, it's got this climate where there's so much rain and so much green, and it's also fairly dense compared to America, that, someone once said that we have one of the most diverse availabilities of all sorts of different kinds of food types and meat types. And in a weird way, is this like a microcosm to study as far as what the world might look like one day if we're a lot of more population? And what things do you think we're doing right here or wrong?
Well, I think it's like all developed countries right now. If we want to, not to condescend to undeveloped countries, but that's a term that we use in the West. We developed and undeveloped countries, and the similarities are striking. Certainly between the U.S. and the U.K. as well as Europe. And the similarities are that we are degrading the land. Generally, our food system is degrading the land and degrading our health. The food that we're eating is not the same as our grandparents ate in either quality or type. I mean, in the U.S., we've increased our wheat consumption per capita wheat consumption by like 3 times just in the last 2 decades. Growing up, we had either soda crackers or graham crackers. We didn't have wheat thins and wheat wafers and wheat curlies. You know what I'm saying? All these different things. We didn't have Doritos and all this. And so we're fundamentally changing the way we eat, what we eat, but the soil has been degraded through chemical applications, pesticides, herbicides. So the actual nutrition of an ounce of broccoli today is like a third what it was in the 1930s or 40s. Those are fundamental differences, but our bodies have not changed that much. Our bodies are still far more similar to what it was like 5,000 years ago than it is today. So never in the history of civilization have we been able to change so many fundamental aspects of our nest this rapidly as we have here in recent years. And so the challenges facing us are very, very similar. We've got concentrated animal feeding operations. We've got a new language, Listeria, Campylobacter, E. coli, bovine spongiform encephalopathy. When I was growing up and you were growing up, we probably didn't even know anybody that had a food allergy. The phrase food allergy, we didn't know. When you got together for a meal, a potluck, friends or whatever, you didn't have to, well, who's gluten intolerant? Who's allergic to fish? We didn't do that. We just all came together and ate, And so I think it's truly a remarkable response it's a remarkable response from nature and from food specifically to speak to us so violently. In other words, food now doesn't view us as the farm or the land's friend. If I could be a little bit mystical for a minute, yeah. It views us as an imposter, as a conquistador, and that's not a good thing. And that's pretty much everywhere in the developed world.
So it's given us feedback that we're doing something wrong to the land.
Yes. Listen, this new lexicon of little Latin squiggly words that we've all learned to say is an indicator. It's an indicator of a new language that is essentially nature. In my view, it's nature on its knees begging us, stop, please stop. And the question is, are we listening? Or do we say, oh, well, let's see, can we invent a new drug, a new chemical, can we manipulate the DNA in more sophisticated ways to more fundamentally express our dominion and conquistador mentality over nature.
Right. What if you got a phone call today from President-elect Trump and he said, Joel, I want you to be the next Secretary of Agriculture. We're going big. You have carte blanche. You can do whatever you want for the next 4 years. What would you do?
The first thing I would do...
Maybe you had that call already. I don't know.
No, I haven't gotten that call. I don't anticipate that call.
He watches this show, so maybe... Maybe after.
Well, great. Hi, President-elect Trump. It's good to have you. So the first thing that I would do is I would use my bully pulpit to push a constitutional amendment. I mean, we're going big here.
Yeah.
Going big. A constitutional amendment that guarantees every single citizen the freedom of food choice from the source of their choice. Right now, if you want raw milk, you can't get it. If you want a chicken that never went through a chlorine bath, it's almost impossible to get. When people go to the supermarket and they see all this bounty, full shelves in the supermarket, what they don't realize is how many things are not there. What is not there is the artisanal craft, cottage industry, small farm stuff, home butchery, local butchery, home canning. I mean, there's one of my favorite books is called Vertical Diversification. It was written by a guy named Howard Doan back in the 1950s. And he was like Undersecretary of Agriculture in like 1915 in the U.S. At the end of his life, his friends said, Doan, you need to write a book about your thinking. And he wrote this book about vertical diversification, and he explained how when farmers are only selling commodities, they're always on the end of a whip, because a farmer is the only part in the food chain that can defer some pretty major things, like, you know, if I don't have enough money to fertilize my soil this year, I just won't fertilize it. If I don't have money to pay my family or my kids, well, we just won't get paid this year. Whereas, you know, if you're running a distribution company, you can't run bald tires on your truck. It won't pass inspection. You know, you can run bald tires on your tractor and defer expenses for a while. And so what happens is, as you move up that chain all the way to the supermarket, you have less and less wiggle room in the system, both legally and in public relations. You have less and less wiggle room. As you get down to the farm, you have more. And so he was a huge advocate of what he called vertical diversification, where we take our commodities closer to the retail level. If you're making chicken, we'll make chicken pot pie. And his book has all these stories of people that, for example, lifted their farm out of poverty in the Depression by butchering chickens and canning them and selling canned chicken through the postal service. I mean, people would buy, you know, quarts of canned chicken, you know, and this was completely unregulated. But it gave farmers access to the retail dollar. At that time, the amount of money, the amount, if you take the retail dollar, the farmer's portion was in the 40 percentile range. 40 cents of the retail dollar went to the farmer.
Okay.
Today, it's down to 9 cents. And so the farmer has gotten less and less and less of a percentage of this retail dollar. And never has our culture been more interested in convenience food. We eat on the run, we eat in the car, we want convenience food, but never has the farmer been so denied access to being able to access that value added, you know, retail aspect.
Okay. And so this comes back to the amendment of saying that I should be able to have. Okay, yeah.
So the amendment is that every citizen should be able to purchase the food of their choice from the source of their choice. So if you want to come out to my farm and you look around and say, man, I like what you're doing here. In fact, I really like that pepperoni you made last week. I want to buy a pound of that. We should be able to interact as human beings. We should be able to interact in a personal commerce without a bureaucrat getting in the middle of this transaction. And if we offered that, believe me, everywhere I travel, there are thousands and thousands of farmers with answers to Campylobacter, Listeria, foodborne disease, nutrient deficiency, all over the place, but they're hampered from being able to access the market due to these scale prejudicial licensing and regulations that get between you and I being able to interact in business.
And that's because the product gets commoditized.
The product gets commoditized. And
that's not what it should be.
Yes,
it should
and all the product has to pass through a gauntlet of scale prejudicial licenses and infrastructure.
And that's where corners get cut.
Yeah. Look, if the government says in order to make charcuterie, you need a $1,000 thermometer to monitor temperature. Well, that's one thing if you're making a tractor trailer load. It's quite a different thing if you're making a 5-gallon bucket. One is not a problem. The other keeps you from being able to start. See, innovation always has to start embryonically, small. And what happens when we take a transaction between you and I and we call it the same as a transaction between a chicken conglomerate and a conglomerate in Thailand that's importing chicken, when we call those two transactions the same thing, we make the innovation, the innovative alternative too big to be able to have a prototype. And the problem is new things are born small. Babies,
Right.
they're born small.
And right now they're being snuffed out.
Yeah,
because they never
and
come
if
to
the
market.
baby is too big to be birthed, then the dream, my entrepreneurial dream, can never get through the birth canal because it has to be birthed so big. We desperately need mechanisms to allow these small dreams to be birthed. If it's successful, it grows. If it's not, it dies. That's fine. But it has to be birthed small. So my amendment would free up this innovation sector and individual consumers to be able to opt out of the supermarket, opt out of the conventional fare, and say, you know what? I'm gonna make an end run around the system. And there is latent desire for that. I mean, it's what drove Brexit.
Right.
It's what drove Trump's ascendancy.
This reminds me a little of the Freedom of Information Act, where we're talking about bandwidth to the internet, and the big cable companies want to control it. But the beauty of the internet is that I can put a website up and I can get similar search rankings as Comcast. And so it seems like you're saying a similar thing. I go to the supermarket right now, I see food controlled by probably 3 major food distributors in America.
Yes.
And I'll never see the little guys. So
That's right.
You're
That's
almost democratizing food choice.
Exactly. Just like the internet, my website on our little farm is not significantly different than Tyson's. I mean, it's the ultimate democratizer. But the reason it works is because there's equal access. We don't have to go to a licensing class and fill out reports. And just imagine if to go on eBay with a product, you had to get certified that you could operate your computer.
Right.
You had to get your office occupationally safety certified, so when the hot bid comes in and you jump up, you don't get a splinter in your rear end from the plywood makeshift table.
Okay. So the regulation is killing the little guy,
Yep.
and at the same time, I'm guessing Tyson has some nice, well-paid people in D.C.
Yes.
that keep the regulations at least unchanged to where they control a large part of the market and the profits.
Or if a regulation comes down, that regulation tends to be, gentle or concessionary toward them, and it tends to affect us, a lot more.
Okay.
A lot
What
more
else?
aggressively.
If you could do a couple other sweeping things where no more of this or no more of that.
Oh, well, so you get the constitutional amendment. Now you free up entrepreneurism, which, see, I really think Trump would be in favor of.
Right.
I think that would excite him. The second thing.
And capitalism usually leads to innovation when it's allowed to go free.
Yes, exactly. The next thing I would do is eliminate all subsidies. Not all. No more subsidies. Nothing. All right? Because every time the government manipulates the marketplace, it's picking winners and losers. And we don't need the government picking winners and losers.
Yeah,
we just need winners and losers to...
A lot of that going on in the EU as well. Plenty of that. Have you seen the movie King Corn? I'm sure you probably saw
yes.
that. And
Oh,
so
yes.
I saw it back in the day. If people haven't watched it, they should watch it because it's an interesting statement on, of course, high fructose corn syrup. But it has these 2 guys. They leave college. You must have been laughing. They go out to the Midwest. They plant, I think, an acre of corn.
An acre of corn.
And they sit around and they go ahead and grow it and they till it. First of all, they take the first bite of the corn and they spit it out. And they're like, this doesn't taste like corn. And then the mentor farmer comes over and says, oh, no. That's not edible corn. That's high fructose corn syrup corn.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, we're going to go sell it and get our profit. And he's like, no. You don't make money on this. You get the government check. And that's the only way you make money on it.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know. I thought that's something I remember as being something that's wrong.
Yeah, that's right. The whole and of course now they've in the U.S. they've changed the word. They don't call it subsidy anymore. They call it crop insurance. Crop insurance sounds much more benign and helpful than subsidies. Right. So we use wordsmith and clever speak,
right.
to change the language so that people will continue to accept the same silliness.
Right. Now, did that come out of a policy in the 50s for America to grow its own food from kind of a global safety point of view? And do you think that went too far? Because I remember in the movie, it was like there were some policies back then that they did it for a security reason. And do you think that's kind of out of date?
Well, sure. You have to realize that the downside of self-government is to vote special concessions for ourselves. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said, you have a republic until the people determine that they can vote for themselves largesse from the public treasury. And so in the early 20s and 30s, as what I just described of the farmer being on the end of this whip, you got to remember farmers at that time this was still an agrarian economy, and farmers there were millions of them, lots and lots and lots of them. And so they were a big political force. And so they decided to vote for themselves protections. And this all came out of those sorts of protections, including, the Transcontinental Railroad. We've got to make sure that we grow grain to have something to haul on a railroad. So you had policies that concessionized the railroad. So we want to make sure that there's plenty of commodity and business to haul on the railroads. That was a concession to the big railroad barons, right? And so you have all these little things, and they add up over time to where what we get down the road a century, all these well-intentioned things for security become convoluted. We've got hardening of the not hardening of the arteries, we've got hardening of the bureaucracies, as they overlap and build redundancy and this and that, and it just becomes a labyrinth of problems. The Romans always had an axiom that you could tell the health and vitality of a culture by the number of laws that it had. It said when a culture is vibrant and strong and healthy, you don't need very many laws. The lunatic fringe out there, those innovators, the lunatic fringe, who cares if somebody doesn't want to vaccinate their kid? It's okay. Who cares if somebody wants to drink raw milk and kill themselves? That's okay. Those lunatics, not a problem. We're strong. We can handle those weirdos. But when a culture becomes vapid and paranoid and timid and weak, it sees bogeymen everywhere, all these bogeymen and demons, and so it tends to create more and more laws to protect me. I'm scared, and this is what happens. And so I would suggest that our laws upon laws upon laws today do not indicate a new evolution toward strength and awareness. They indicate a new devolution into fear and timidity, where all we see are bogeymen and demons, and we've got to tell that one to stop and tell that one to stop. And one of the reasons why the electronic, Amazon and the whole internet revolution has occurred is because that's the only sector of the economy that's largely unregulated. And food has been the hardest because it's had regulations longer than anything else. So it's the most regulated to electronics, the least regulated, and you can see the vibrancy of the two movements and the power of the orthodoxy in the two movements just by looking at how long it's been controlled.
Right. So second one, no more subsidies. Say you get one more. And maybe this has to do with some of these organizations like Tyson, or maybe it has to do with laws when it comes to growing meat and agriculture. I don't know. But what if you have one more? What would be on your list?
Oh, my. One more would probably be to change because believe it or not, the school lunch program is under the USDA. And I would probably move the school lunch program to a local source, triple the money. And when people say, "Oh, we don't have the money for that," listen, all the money we spent on the Iraq War in one day would triple the school, every meal in the whole lunch program for 3 years. I mean, it's crazy. It's not like there's not money in the system. We just don't want to allocate it that way. Right now, the school lunch program is essentially a salvage program for sell, buy, and scavenge program for the industry. It's a salvage program for the industry. It's essentially a sweetheart subsidy deal for the industry. When it has stuff that they can't sell to people that actually buy it, well, then the government buys it and gives it to our kids. And so I think I would fundamentally revamp that, because as the kids go, so they go the country. And so if we move the kids from Doritos to pastured meats and baby carrots and that sort of thing, now the parents would rebel, but that's too bad. Parents can go take a hike. You said I had carte blanche.
Yeah, carte blanche.
So I'm going to do it.
Right.
I'm sovereign for the day, and we're going to do it. And I'm convinced that if we locally source with fresh stuff, pretty soon the kids get their body speaks to them, and they understand. Yeah, this is real food.
Right. How are our food and diet choices going to play out over the next 20 years in America and the rest of the world? Are we headed for some really dark times coming up, or do you see more people educating themselves and listening to the kind of things you're talking about, or is that really 40, 50 years out?
The one thing I don't do is prophesy, but I can tell you this. What I see happening now is both sides gaining. In other words, there is a burgeoning local food awareness. I mean, viscerally for us, 5 years ago, we were composting chicken feet. Now, we can't get enough of them, and we sell them, and we've increased the price 3 times in a year, and we still can't keep chicken feet in. Why? Because of the paleo, the foodie, the Weston A. Price folks. They're getting this scratch cooking and gelatin. So we have a burgeoning, food revolution going on in this sector. But we also have the opposite going on in the industrial sector, where we're seeing a circling of the wagons, a cheerleading of the salvation by genetically modified organisms, new drugs, new generation drugs, driverless tractors, robotics, all this stuff. So it's interesting to me, the old Hegelian thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and it's interesting to see that you see these equal and opposite reactions, occurring at the same time. Where we're going to end up with this, who knows? My personal belief is that what you as an individual can do now with this burgeoning local food movement, never has it been more available to you. I mean, if you really want to change the way you eat and patronize a food system that builds soil, protects animals, increases biodiversity, all these things, it's never been easier, all right? At the same time, we've never had more noise and more voices from the other side, poo-pooing, demeaning this other movement.
Right.
There's a battle going on here, and I tend to think that societal change. So individuals can do a lot of cool stuff now that's been easier, but I think societally, we're still far more interested in the dysfunction of the Kardashians than we are our food. And we think that we can get health out of a bottle and from a surgeon, and so we can eat thoughtlessly and conveniently and cheaply and easily, and these guys will fix our ball bearings when they wear out.
Right. It sounds like a huge marketing and public relations war.
It is.
Because ultimately, we're all consumers, and we can go out of our way and choose a locally grown organic option. Yeah, you might have to go online. You might have to order it, become part of a collective.
Yes.
Get the food delivered, weekly or whatever. Or you can go and drive through McDonald's.
Yeah.
And now there's a PR war happening in your brain that, McDonald's isn't so bad, and we got the new vegetables at McDonald's, and la. And then, so it's this war in our brains, right? And we just have to try to make the correct and more informed choices.
It is, and unfortunately, we don't have an accounting system that accounts for all of those externalized costs that cheap food creates, from antimicrobial resistance to superbugs, MRSA, C. diff, to Campylobacter, E. coli, Listeria. I mean, these are all caused by that. Interestingly, about 12 years ago, the Government Accounting Office in the U.S., the Congressional GAO, a Government Accounting Office, which is a nonpartisan, kind of whatever research group that works for Congress, they were commissioned to research foodborne illness, toxic food. And they came out with 4 things that created foodborne illnesses. Number 1 was centralized farming, huge centralized farms. Number 2, centralized processing, huge mega processing facilities. Number 3 was long distance transportation, long distribution chains. And the 4th was commitment to antibiotics, was routine antibiotic use, drugging your dinner. Now, interestingly, so this is what they came up with. Now, that actually is true. I mean, something true came out of the government. All right, cool, great, all right. Now, you would think that somebody at a high policy decision, a president, let's say, would look at those 4 things and say, okay, if that's the problem, what's the opposite of those things? Well, what's the opposite of centralized farms? Oh, a lot of small, vibrant family farms. What's the opposite of centralized processing? Oh, community kitchens, cottage industry, maybe your own home kitchen, domestic culinary arts. Use your techno-glitzy kitchen. It's more gadgetized than anybody's ever had, and use it to prepare, preserve, package, and work with food. Now we have time bake. We've got hot and cold water. We've got refrigerators. We've got ranges and cool stuff. The third was long distance distribution. What's the opposite of warehouses and long distance distribution? Let's see. We got to think real hard on that one. What would be the opposite? That sounds like local. Local, transparent systems. And the 4th one, the routine use of antibiotics. Well, what's the opposite of that? Well, the opposite of that is creating a terrain on farm for the tomatoes, the peppers, the chickens, and the pigs, a habitat that actually reverences and honors the physiological distinctiveness of that life form, of that being. So it affirms the pigness, it affirms the tomato-ness, it affirms a habitat and creates a terrain that actually builds immunological function. Wow, amazing that. We could actually build immunological function. And so, the solution to these 4 things are not rocket science. But what would we do? We just push them under the table because that's too hard.
Right.
And we have too big a ship to turn around. We've got, as I think Teddy Roosevelt is said to have said, he said, it's really hard to get a person to see something different when his paycheck depends on believing something else.
Yeah. Well, it's and it's funny. Yeah, I've heard, I think this was in a movie, I'm not sure, where they said you go and you buy that Big Mac at McDonald's and they charge you $3. But if you look at all the costs,
right,
it's more like $12 or $14 because you're paying for all those diseases, all the carbon, all of this and this, but people don't know it, and it's padded into their tax bill and
That's
et cetera.
Yeah.
And so if they knew those things, or if they were actually priced into the product and not priced into some government body, then that might make people decide differently.
Isn't it amazing that if I go out and pollute a river, that is not a liability against gross domestic product. That's actually an asset because the cost of cleanup stimulates economic activity. If we have a bunch of juvenile delinquents and we have to build more detention centers, that's economic activity. You have to laugh because intuitively we all understand, well, no, pollution should be a liability. More jails should be a liability. More people on welfare should be a liability. You know, it shouldn't be an asset of economic activity. But that's how inverted and skewed and whatever, you know, wonky our accounting system is. That people as creative as we're supposedly, you know, we're supposedly very creative.
Yeah.
That we're so creative, that we're so uncreative that we can't even measure, account, or articulate, exactly as you said, for these externalized costs that are buried in the price of shortcuts.
So less government could be the answer here.
Yes, I agree.
There was a movie that came out a year or two ago called Cowspiracy.
Yes.
I'm curious what you think of it. I think you might have seen it. I don't know.
Yes.
You know, and let me just say that there's kind of two parts of that movie, and I'm kind of curious how you feel about both of them, because at one point they come in at the end and conclude that, you know, animals are bad. But at one point early in the movie, it was interesting because they kind of put the onus back into the consumer and saying, okay, if you really want to take responsibility, look at your own food choices. And while you will give money to Greenpeace, you'll put a tap on your shower to reduce the water flow, you won't take responsibility that buying that piece of factory farm meat is actually going to waste 100 gallons of water. So whereas maybe some people that grow meat might disagree with the ultimate conclusions as far as the methane production and it might go to global warming, I thought it was interesting to just put it back to the consumer by saying everyone's willing to do all these other things, save the world, save the this, save that, but when it comes to saying, why don't you look at your diet, no. I've always been able to eat what I want to eat, let alone for your own health, but maybe the planet. General thoughts about that film? Yes,
well, the general thought is I'm in complete agreement that we are the masters of our trajectory. It's not only is that affirming and empowering to a person to say, yes, I can effect change. Who wants to think that they can't effect change? I mean, that's, well, you huddle, you curl up in your cocoon then, right? If you say that you can't affect change. So I'm a huge promoter of, I mean, on our farm, on the little slogan on our cooler bags for our customers is healing the land one bite at a time. So we're very aggressive about connecting that dot between my mouth and ultimately the air, soil, and water, the resource commons that we all enjoy. I get that 100%. So now let's deal with we shouldn't have animals. We have to understand, first of all, that prior to modern times, there were actually way more pounds of animals than there are today, even with factory farms and all that. In the United States, you know, we had millions and hundreds of millions of bison. We had flocks of birds that were so magnificent. Audubon said, he sat under a tree, the founder of the Audubon Society, sat under a tree, he said, I couldn't see the sun for 3 days because the birds blocked out the sun. Native Americans had stories of flocks of birds coming in like passenger pigeons, which are now extinct, and you know, prairie chickens and things, and landing in a forest so thickly that they literally broke all the branches off, and they'd get up in the morning and look, and all they saw were these spires, you know, sticking up, and all the branches were gone, and an inch of bird poop on the ground. 200 million beavers who ate more salad, because they're herbivores, they ate more salad than a human. So that's way more than half the human population in the U.S. right now that was eating salads. Okay.
There was a huge export in the early days, beaver pelts, right?
Yes,
and they killed
absolutely.
them all.
And now they're gone. What I'm getting at is that when you add up all these things, there was actually more nutrition produced pre-European colonialization of North America than is there today, even with Monsanto, you know, chemical fertilizers and John Deere tractors. So if animals create climate change, why didn't it happen at that time? So, you know, that's one response, and that's a response that doesn't have the answer is it's not the animals, it's the way the animals are managed. So the second point that I'll say about Cowspiracy is, in fact, I did an article on this for Mother Earth News magazine called "You Can't Measure What Ain't."
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
You know, when the presses run at 12 midnight and something comes in at 10:30, I can't sit here and say, oh, I have writer's block. I can't think of, editor's saying, I need it in 15 minutes. Get busy, boy. Get busy, boy.